My name's Mark, and you're listening to Headstraight. Hello, you lot, and welcome back. In this episode, I'm answering the question, what if people don't like who I'm becoming? Because there's a time when all of a sudden things just start to feel off. So you stop jumping in. You don't rush to reply. You don't smooth everything over. You don't automatically explain yourself. You don't take on everyone else's mood the second it enters the room. And instead of that feeling like relief, things start to feel different. Not louder, not dramatic, just slightly off. Someone says, "You've changed." Someone else jokes, "You're quieter these days." Someone looks at you a bit longer than usual before speaking, or they go quieter themselves, or they stop including you in the same way. And even though nothing big has happened, you can feel that something has shifted. This episode is about that shift. Not what it means about you, but what's happening around you when it shows up. Because when people start reacting to who you're becoming, it can feel personal. But most of the time, it isn't. And it doesn't just happen in one part of your life. That's usually how you know it's real. It maybe happens in a group chat. You don't jump in like you normally would. And someone asks, "Are you all right?" Not because they're concerned, but because the silence feels unfamiliar. Maybe it happens at home. You don't rise to an argument the way that you used to. You say less. And then someone tells you that you're being a bit weird. Maybe it happens at college or work. You stop absorbing someone else's stress and suddenly they seem irritated, like you've changed the rules without telling them. And what's confusing is this. You haven't made a statement. You haven't announced some big change. You've just stepped back. But stepping back is enough to make a difference that people can feel. So let me tell you about what's actually changed, even if no one says it out loud, because this is something that people don't realize straight away. You haven't become distant. You haven't become rude. You haven't suddenly turned into someone else. You've just stopped doing certain things automatically. Maybe you don't reply instantly, or explain yourself fully, or maybe you don't laugh things off in the way that you used to. Maybe you don't take responsibility for every mood in the room, or fill silences that aren't yours to fill. To you, that feels like maturity. To others, it feels like the old version of you is missing. And when something familiar goes missing, that's when people notice, even if they can't fully explain why it bothers them. Now, there's something important to understand. There are roles that we have that we never agreed to, but nevertheless, we still played them. Every group settles into patterns, usually without talking about them. There's often the one who listens, the one who keeps things light, the one who steps in when things get tense, or the one who replies the fastest. And there's the one who takes responsibility. Those roles make things easier. They smooth out the edges. They keep things moving. And if you've been in one of those roles, without even deciding to be, people get used to you being there. So when you stop, not dramatically, not angrily, but just quietly, the system reacts to this. Not because you're wrong, but because something predictable has changed. And instead of saying, "I don't know where I stand now," people say, "You're different. You don't care like you used to. You're not the same." And this is usually where things can get uncomfortable. Not enough has changed for anyone to talk about it properly, but too much has changed to ignore it. So you feel it in silences, or you feel it in tone shifts, or jokes that land slightly sharper than they did before. Or maybe you feel it in pressure to explain yourself, or maybe in people testing whether you'll step back into your old role. And internally, there's often moments like this. Do I explain myself or let this sit? Do I smooth this over or do I leave it alone? There's no arguments, no shouting, just that pull to make things feel normal again. So let me explain why shrinking back into your old self feels so tempting. Let's be honest, going back into the old version of yourself would make things easier in the short term. The comments would stop, the awkwardness would fade, people around you would relax again. And it's tempting, not because you want to undo yourself, but because humans like familiarity. We like knowing where we stand. But ease isn't always the same as health. Sometimes ease just means you doing more work than you need to. And that's the choice sitting quietly underneath this episode. Comfort now, or a better you later. Now, there are definitely things that you don't actually owe anyone. When people react to your change, you don't owe them a full explanation. You don't owe them reassurance that you're still the same. You don't owe them any proof that you care. And you don't owe them a return to old habits just to keep things smooth. You're allowed to change without making a speech. You're allowed to grow in ways that aren't visible to everyone. And you're allowed to let people adjust in their own time. Now, most reactions fade once people realise that the change isn't temporary. Now, as we close this episode, it's important for you to understand that reaction isn't rejection. If people are responding differently to you, it doesn't mean that you've done something wrong. It usually means that you're less predictable, that you're carrying less, that you're not filling the same space anymore. And that can feel uncomfortable and sometimes awkward or sometimes isolating in a quiet way. But reaction isn't rejection. It's adjustment. And not everyone adjusts at the same speed. In the next episode, we're going to talk about what can happen after this stage, when the reaction dies down, when the noise settles and you're left with a quieter feeling that you didn't quite expect. Not conflict, not drama, just distance. And we're going to take a look at what to do when growth changes how close you feel. So, are you up for it? Of course you are.